You know, with all this talk of returning to work from remote locations back into the office, I've started to hear a lot more discussion around the 4-day work week. And I thought it was an interesting topic. I've heard this actually and seen a lot of videos recently around companies trying this out. And there's been a lot of companies that have tried this out over the last several years with a lot of benefits. There is a lot less burnout from the employee side of things. And from a lot of these studies, productivity has actually gone up. But I start to wonder though, like, how feasible is this in our workplace in this day and age? And what industries does this apply to? And what happens to those industries that can't do that? And I think that there's actually quite a bit of discussion around just like even the remote locations. So people that can't work remotely because their job requires them to go into the office, it would kind of fall into the same suit. And so I wonder if there would be a lot more backlash on a 4-day work week if they started to implement it. And then I also start to wonder too, like with a 4-day work week, what is that inclusive of? Is that just for 8-hour days, or would companies want you to work for 10-hour days? I think there's benefits to both sides of it, but I'd be interested to kind of understand as companies maybe start to adopt this more and more, what that looks like moving forward. You know, not surprising, there's actually quite a bit of pros that come with a 4-day work week. There was actually a study that was done in Microsoft in Japan where they saw a 40% increase in productivity. Not only that, but they also saw decreases in things like energy usage, paper usage. They limited meetings to only 30 minutes, so that was also a benefit there too. And they actually just looked at how to cut out a lot of the waste, so they were only working on the things that really mattered. And I think there's also benefits from a mental standpoint. Mental health is also a very important thing in our day and age, and so having a 4-day work week can actually reduce the strain on your brain. And I think when you get to a point where you have the benefits of not having this burnout capacity, people start to enjoy their jobs that much better. And I think with most people, we're in a place in our lives where work isn't the thing that we're doing all the time. We don't want to do work. That's not why we're here. We're wanting to enjoy our families, we're wanting to enjoy our lives. And so having a 4-day work week allows people to do this a lot more often and a lot better. In fact, I think they can start to really unwind and they can start to really enjoy their time off a lot more. Now, on the other side of it, there are a lot of cons that exist with it. I mean, like I talked about, would companies want to have you work for 10-hour days, or would they require you to work for 8-hour days? And then also it's the workload. Would companies require you to do the same amount of work in 4 days that you would 5? But again, as productivity increases, again, you're looking at productivity from a 4-day work week, not cramming all those 5 days into 4 days. And I think it's also about how it's implemented. If it's implemented poorly and companies aren't looking at the requirements of it and the benefits of it, and they're just wanting you to do more work in less time, what does that mean then for companies that want you to come back to 5 days? Now you've done 5 days worth of work in 4 days. If they require you to come back to work 5 days a week, would they expect you to do 6 days of work in 5 days? You know, and it starts to think about like, how do you get into that pitfall area? And I would hate for companies to look at this as an opportunity to do an increase in productivity short term, only to extend it into 5 to 6 days again. And it's not to say that companies wouldn't require you to come back to work 5 days a week. I think that's something that companies will start to look at too, is there's shifts in business all over the place. And so as companies ramp up for their busier season, maybe there is a requirement for you to do that. Maybe there is a requirement for you to come back into work 5 days a week. But again, I think it's also important for companies to think about what it is that they're doing that isn't worthwhile. And then like I talked about with the industries out there that can't do it, I think about the service industry like healthcare, maybe a lot of our customer support. If you don't have the correct shifts in place, there's a lot of shifts that are 7 days a week. And so you could still do it, but you might have to require more shifts out there. And so would that require more overhead, or could they do it with the current staff that they've got in place? You know, and probably the bigger thing that's more concerning is the pay piece of it. Would companies continue to pay you if you only work 4 days a week? It might be easier to think about if you're working 4 10-hour days because it's still a 40-day work week, but what if you worked 4 8-hour days and so you were dropping down to 32 hours a week? Do you think companies would continue to pay you at that same rate? again, everything right now is about cost. And so as more and more companies start thinking about this, they might even use this as a tactic to reduce their costs. And I would hate for people to have to do that. And again, it's not to say that I don't want people to get paid for work that they're not doing anymore. But if a lot of these studies out there are seeing 40% increases in productivity, that means more work is being done. So, in a sense, they should be paid for it. So it's just a pitfall that you have to kind of keep an eye on. You don't want to see a lot of these companies start to reduce salaries because of it too. Thanks so much for watching today. I think a 4-day work week is an interesting topic. I would be curious to see how companies start to move forward with this. If you are working a 4-day work week after your company has moved from a 5-day work week, I'd love to hear from you. What is it working well for you? What industries are you in? What sorts of things did you find as maybe obstacles along the way? Me personally, I enjoy working. I like to stay busy, but it's not to say that I always want to do extra work. If I had a 4-day work week, I think it would take some adjusting. I would want to know what could I do with that free time. And I think that's also very important because we don't want people to get into a place where they become lazy because they have that extra, they don't know how to spend that time. I think it's important for people to use their time wisely. And if you had 3 days off, how would you do that? And then I think there's also opportunities to think about how would you want those 4 days to be working? Maybe there's opportunities where you're working 2 days on, you take a day off, you need to work another 2 days, and then you get 2 days off again, maybe having a Wednesday off. How would that split up your week? So maybe there's opportunities in there to kind of split up the week. So you're not necessarily having 3 days off in a row, maybe you're having that split there too. It would be interesting to think about. If you haven't had a chance, do me a favor, take a look at some of the videos I've got posted. Remember, elevating yourself to the next level, it starts with just a single step. Take your step today. We'll see you next time.